Hello, and welcome to a Pokemon XD Gale in Darkness video, where today I'm going to be completing the game with Dustox and Venomoth. Now these two moths are actually very similar, they're the exact same type of bug and poison, and they also share the same ability, which explains why they are being paired up here. However, one big issue is that on top of all that, they also share very similar movesets. So I can see that being a big issue later down the line, especially when I need to distribute out TMs. But anyway, let's go ahead and get right into that. Starting with their stats, Dustox has 60 HP, 50 attack, 70 defense, 50 special attack, 90 special defense, and 65 speed, and gets access to mostly normal and psychic type moves, but it also does get bug, poison, grass, ghost, and flying type moves, which that type variety could come in handy. Now moving on to Venomoth, it has 70 HP, 65 attack, 60 defense, 90 special attack, 75 special defense, and 90 speed, and gets access to quite a large variety of moves. However, one thing to note is that even though it does have a much better level up learn set, it doesn't have nearly as many TM moves, and so it will be relying more on those level up moves, which some of them are pretty bad. Now with that being said, I do think that these two Pokemon are going to be fairly obvious in how they play. Venomoth is much more of a quick special attacker, and so it's going to be more of the offensive role, and then of course Dustox, having 70 defense and 90 special defense, is going to make it play more of a support role. But anyway, with that, let's go ahead and get right into the run. Now we start with our Dustox in particular, who has a naive nature, raising its speed but lowering its special defense. Honestly, a pretty good nature for it. They both get access to the Shield Dust ability, which gets rid of all secondary effects on moves, and Dustox only gets the move Confusion by level 10, which might hold it back a bit. Venomoth, on the other hand, has a Bashful nature, which is a neutral nature, though I think that's completely fine for it. It gets access to the Shield Dust ability as well, and unlike Dustox, it gets Silver Wind, Tackle, Disable, and Supersonic by level 10. And Silver Wind is a very strong move because it has a 10% chance to raise all of your stats by one stage, though it is balanced out by the fact that it only has 5 PP. Anyway, we run into a Cascoon, the pre-evolution of Dustox. Goodbye, other Cascoon. And then we go into the battle against the old man with not really too much issue, and that's because these are two fully evolved Pokemon, so of course they're not going to struggle too much despite their stats not being incredible. Aber goes down in a single Silver Wind, out comes Horsey, go for another Silver Wind and Confusion. Silver Wind nearly takes down Shroomish, and Dustox finishes it off, and I think that's going to be a very apparent theme throughout the rest of this video. Is Venomoth is going to do a large amount of damage, and if it doesn't quite get a one-shot, Dustox is going to finish it off. Anyway, with that, at level 13, Dustox gets the move Gust, and then I go into the battle against the Power Rangers. I decide to fight Green because I have super effective damage against this Pokemon, and I am 4 times resistant to Grass type moves, so he can't really do much to me. Anyway, with that, let's go ahead and start just a little bit of rambling. If you are enjoying this video so far, consider liking, and if you have any Pokemon suggestions, please put them down below. Now to go on just a little bit of a ramble, I have used Dustox in the past, though I had it paired with Beautifly because they are the Silcoon-Cascoon pairings. It makes sense as well. But the thing is they didn't end up performing too well, and so I think it'll be interesting to see how Dustox does with a different team member. And the thing about Venomoth is that I haven't actually used it before, I don't think, because it didn't make the cut in the bug type video. So it'll be cool to see just how good it is and how well it ends up working with a partner. But with that, we beat Green, and now we can move on to the Cypher base. At level 17, Venomoth gets the move Confusion, which I teach over Disable, and then soon after, Dustox gets the move Protect at level 17, and then Moonlight at level 20. And then we go into the battle against Lavrina with not too much issue in between. She leads with a Love Disc and a Beautifly, and right away I want to get rid of the Beautifly because it is going to be doing super effective damage against me, and Silver Wind and Gust take it down below half health, and I think it might just be in range for Gust to take it down. Silver Wind into Love Disc nearly takes it down to half, and luckily Beautifly does go down to another Gust. Then out comes Roselia, so I decide to double into it now. Silver Wind takes it down to half, and I go for Confusion, but I'm pretty sure Roselia's special defense is actually higher than its defense, so maybe Gust would have been a one-shot. I'm not sure about that, but I decide to go ahead and finish it off with one last Confusion, and then she sends out her final Pokemon. Oh, but before that, Venomoth hits level 20 and tries to learn Poison Powder. I decide not to teach it. Anyway, she sends out her Shadow Delcatty, and because the Leech Seed was set up on Dustox before the Roselia went down, Delcatty now has the Leech Seed effect applied to it, and so it is going to be healing every turn, but I think Dustox is doing about as much damage as it heals, so I'm in a decent position, as well as Delcatty is confused. So as long as it hits itself in confusion a few times, I think I'm safe. But unfortunately, even though I do take it down to low red, it's able to hit through the confusion, and it takes down Venomoth, my main damage dealer, and with me getting so low, I decide to use Moonlight, which unfortunately does allow Delcatty another chance to heal, and Leech Seed finishes me off. So a bit unfortunate, but had it hit itself in confusion, I think I could have won. Though that's not really a reliable strategy. Anyway, I go back into the battle once again, though this time I do have a bit more of a plan. I'm going to take Beautifly down low, and then I can finish it off with Confusion, and then I can use Gust into Roselia, and we can see if it was actually a one-shot or not. And judging by that Gust, it would have taken it down before, and so it wouldn't have been able to set up the Leech Seed. Venomoth finishes off Roselia with a Silver Wind and gets the 10% Omni boost, raising all of its stats by one stage, and then out comes our final Pokemon, the Shadow Delcatty once again, though this time I am in a much better position. I go for Silver Wind, nearly dealing half its health, and I get a second Omni boost, which is incredibly rare. That I believe would be a 1% chance. So I'm able to finish it off with ease, and then all that's left is the Love Disc, which unfortunately can't really do much damage to Venomoth anymore. And so even though the battle was a little bit lucky, I get past it on the second attempt, and now we move on. Now, of course, you cannot have a Pokemon XD Galactus video without the obligatory Mirror B. Okay, well, as always, it's great seeing you, Mirror B. In the ONBS building, I run into another Dustox. Hello, other Dustox. Goodbye, other Dustox. And then at level 24, Dustox gets the move Psybeam, which I of course teach over Confusion, and then I pick up the Ralts at the top of the ONBS building for the Twisted Spoon item, raising all psychic damage by 10%. I go to the Railgun Tower to go pick up my two favorite TMs, Hidden Power and Protect, and I'm going to go ahead and teach Hidden Power to both. And let's go ahead and start with Venomoth. It gets Hidden Power Fighting, which isn't a great Hidden Power type, though it does allow it to hit Steel types, which it can't hit with any of its other moves right now. Unfortunately, it's only 36 base power, but at least it's something. And then we move on to Dustox, who gets Hidden Power Psychic, which really wouldn't be that bad, if not for the fact that I just got Psybeam not too long ago. Anyway, with that, we move on. At level 28, Venomoth gets Stun Spore, which I decide to teach over Tackle. And then I go into the battle against Snattle. He leads with a Quagsire and a Lantern, and I go for Silver Wind and Psybeam into the Quagsire right away, and I get a lucky Omni boost on the first turn, which is definitely going to make this battle go a little bit smoother, hopefully. Another Silver Wind nearly takes down Quagsire, and Psybeam finishes off. Then he sends out his next Pokemon, a Shadow Lunatone. Luckily, it is half Psychic type, so Silver Wind is still doing super effective damage against it and takes it down in a single hit, though I'm not sure if that was possible without the Omni boost. I decide to start dealing a little bit of damage to Lantern, though it really isn't doing that much with Psybeam. Go for Confusion into Cast Form, taking it down nearly to half, and Psybeam takes it down to yellow, gets a lucky Confusion, and Cast Form can be finished off with anything now. So because of that, after a little bit of deliberation, I decide to have Venomoth attack Lantern to deal a little bit more damage, and Psybeam finish off the Cast Form, and then he sends out his final Pokemon, a Matang. And this is the reason I've been holding on to that final Silver Wind, is because I wanted to make sure that I could at least deal decent damage to it. Unfortunately, it wasn't quite as much damage as I was hoping for, and so it is going to take quite a few turns to take down with Hidden Power. Now luckily they are attacking Dustox at the moment, which is very helpful because I can just heal off the damage that they deal, whereas Venomoth, despite having the higher special defense right now, is going to get chipped down over time. And at this point, I'm not quite sure if Hidden Power Fighting is going to get the KO, so I decided to play it a little risky and have Dustox attack this turn, which luckily did work out because Matang decided to attack Venomoth, and so I'm able to take down Matang, and then all that's left is the Lantern. Now, Venomoth at level 31 gets the move Gust, which I had thought about teaching, but decided not to right at the end. I go for another Moonlight just to guarantee I don't go down, and now I can attack without having to worry. Confusion takes it down to low red, and Psybeam finishes off, and we beat Gorgon on the first attempt. Oh, and at level 31, Dustox gets Light Screen. Now, after Snattle is defeated, we move on to the Snag'em base, where I run into another Dustox. Hello, other Dustox. Goodbye, other Dustox. And then soon after, I get the TM for Psychic. Now, the thing is I could teach this to Venomoth because it does have the higher special attack stat, though Venomoth does actually get the move Psychic by level up. whereas Dustox does not. So I think even though it's going to hurt them in the short term, I think in the long run it's going to be better to teach Dustox Psychic now. So I go ahead and do that, do a little bit of extra training throughout the base, get Psybeam for Venomoth, and then Silver Wind for Dustox at level 34. And then I finally go into the battle against Gonzap. He leads with an Electrode and a Nuzleaf, and usually going into this battle you have to worry about either being paralyzed by Spark or getting flinched by Fake Out. However, because of the Shield Dust ability, neither of those can happen. So I'm actually not in any danger right at the beginning, so I take down Electrode without any worry, and then out comes Vileplume. It takes a Psychic, taking it down to yellow, and even though I could finish it off with a Psybeam, I decided to go for Silver Wind, hoping for that 10% chance. It doesn't happen. Out comes Whiscash, go for a Silver Wind to take down the Nuzleaf, and then he sends out his final Pokemon, a Skarmory. And Skarmory might actually be the biggest threat on his team. However, it does have one glaring weakness, and that is the fact that it's not very specially bulky. So I'm hoping that even though I'm not doing super effective damage, it's still going to do quite a bit of damage. And that just so happens to be the case. All that's left is the Whiscash. Psybeam takes it down about a quarter. I decide to heal up with Moonlight in case I get hit by Hyper Beam, which I do. And now that it can't attack this turn, I can freely take it down with Psybeam and Psychic and beat Gonzap on the first attempt. So at level 42, Venomoth gets Sleep Powder, which I teach over Sunspore, and then I finally run into another Venomoth. Hello, other Venomoth. Goodbye, other Venomoth. And then we go into the battle against Gorgon. He leads with a Lairon and a Celio, and I go for Psybeam into the Celio right away, nearly taking it down to half. The Psychic gets a crit, finishing it off, which is very lucky. Then out comes Slowking, go for 2 Silver Winds into it to guarantee it goes down, and then he sends out his next Pokemon, Ursaring. And Ursaring could actually be a threat. Lairon goes for Iron Tail, dealing a little bit of damage to Venomoth. Go for Psybeam into it, nearly taking it down to half, and a Psychic takes it down to low yellow. It doesn't hit itself in confusion, and Slash takes Venomoth down to half. A critical hit Iron Tail takes Dustox down to low red, so I have to heal now. Then he sends out his next Pokemon, a Shadow Primeape, and I'm starting to realize that maybe I was taking Lairon a little too lightly because Dustox is taking a ton of damage from the Iron Tails. I go for Psybeam, which unfortunately is just a little too weak to take down Primeape. Go for Silver Wind to finish it off though. Unfortunately, that was supposed to hit the Hypno. Lairon goes for Earthquake, taking down Venomoth and Dustox in a single turn. So with that, I decide to do a little bit of extra training throughout the pyramid, and I run into another Dustox. Goodbye, other Dustox. Before coming back into the battle a few levels higher, and this time a bit more confident that I can actually take him down. And that's because I realized something that was probably pretty obvious right from the start. A Celio is not a threat whatsoever. Its Earthquakes are pitifully weak, and Aurora Beam doesn't have the secondary effect of lowering attack because of the Shield Dust ability, so I can just keep it around and take down Lairon, which I do have 4 times effective damage against because of Hidden Power Fighting. Now, this was completely out of the blue because I've gotten 3 Omni Boosts throughout this battle so far, 2 on Dustox and 1 on Venomoth, which is exceedingly unlikely. And because of that, of course, I need to start making bad plays and attack a Pokemon that's going to protect on a turn that I know it's going to protect on. But honestly, I'm not in any danger now. Dustox is getting fairly low on health, but I know I can take down Celio, and I'm fairly confident that with 2 special attack boosts, I can take down Primeape with a single Confusion from Dustox, which it does, and then all that's left is Hypno, which 2 Silver Winds should do the trick. Okay, well, maybe only 1 was needed. Anyway, with that, these 2 bugs are doing pretty good. There haven't been any direct walls yet that they've encountered, and while I have done quite a bit of extra training, that's just to get through these fights a bit more smoothly. Anyway, with that, we move on to the battle against the Lavrina. She leads with the Gardevoir and a Gorbis, and right away I want to get rid of Gardevoir because it does have super effective damage against us. At level 52, Venomoth gets the move Psychic, which I teach over Psybeam, and then out comes Roselia. Silverwind takes the Roselia down to half, and as long as Dustox is able to outspeed it, I know I can finish it off before it sets up Leech Seed or Attract. I take down the Gorbis with Psychic, then out comes her first Shadow Pokemon, a Shadow Farfetch, to go for Silverwind to finish off the Roselia, and then out comes her final Pokemon, a Shadow Altaria. Now between these 2, I want to get rid of Farfetch'd because it does have Shadow Panic, which causes confusion, and that's really annoying to deal with. And once it goes down, all that's left is the Altaria, which really isn't a threat. Even though it will survive 2 Psychics, it can't really do much damage to us in return. So after just 1 more turn, I take it down, and we beat Lavrina on the first attempt. Now at the top of the volcano, I run into Snaddle once again. This time he leads with a Metang and Quagsire. And what's interesting is because I have the Shield Dust ability, neither of these Pokemon are actually too dangerous, because Metang can't paralyze or freeze me with Thunder or Ice Punch. It also can't lower my special defense, and Quagsire doesn't have the possibility of paralyzing or lowering my speed. So while they both aren't all that powerful, I do think Metang is definitely the bigger threat because it does have super effective damage with Psychic, so I decide to take it out, and then out comes Scizor, and unfortunately I don't really have any good moves to deal with it, so I do want to put it to sleep as soon as possible, that way I can slowly whittle it down. And because Scizor is such a threat, I do need to focus on it, which unfortunately means that Quagsire is going to stay alive. Scizor is taken down to very low HP, so I know I can finish off with anything at this point, so I decide to go with Silver Wind. That way I can possibly get an Omni Boost, which I do actually get. However, at this point the defense boosts don't really help me too much, and then he sends out his first Shadow Pokemon, a Shadow Solrock. I go for Silver Wind into it, doing over half, but Venomoth goes down to another Body Slam from Quagsire. I finish it off on the following turn though, and then he sends out Castform. Quagsire started using Waterfall, which is probably doing more damage than Body Slam was doing to me, and Flamethrower takes Dustox down to half, and Waterfall takes it down below half. Go for Psychic to finish off the Castform. Not sure if that crit was necessary though, and then he sends out his final Pokemon, a Shadow Starmie. And as long as Silver Wind actually takes it down in a single hit, I think I'm likely to win, though unfortunately it does survive on low yellow, and it finishes me off. So I decide to go ahead and do a little bit of extra training, where I run into another Dustox. Hello other Dustox, goodbye other Dustox, and then I go into the battle once again. The start is exactly the same, with me going for Silver Wind and Metang to take it down, and hopefully I can get an Omni Boost a little earlier, that way I can make more use of the stat increases. And so I go for another Silver Wind, and luckily I get it. And so I should be able to take down Scizor a little easier. However, I'm still going to play it safe and go for Sleep Powder, that way I guarantee Scizor isn't a threat and isn't going to use Aerial Ace and do a ton of damage. I go for another Psychic, taking it down to nearly half. Quagsire's Waterfalls really aren't doing too much damage. Go for another Psychic to take it down to low red, and another Psychic finishes it off, and then he sends out the Shadow Solrock once again. And I know that I'm faster than it, so I should be able to take it down in a single hit with a single Silver Wind, which I do. And just to make sure that Dustox isn't going to get taken down, I go ahead and go for Moonlight, bringing it nearly up to full HP. I go for Psychic to take down the Castform in a single hit, and then out comes the final Pokemon once again, the Shadow Starmie. And I already know that I did a little over half to it last time, which seems to be about the same even after a little bit of extra training. So I go for another Silver Wind to finish it off, and then all that's left is the Quagsire, which Psychic takes it nearly down to half, and Venomoth finishes it off with a Silver Wind. And a crit just to be thorough. Anyway, with that, we beat Snaddle, and I go ahead and teach Venomoth Protect over Hidden Power, and then I go into the battle against Ardos. He leads with a Shadow Swallow and Alakazam, and right away I want to get rid of the Alakazam, because Psychic would be dealing quite a bit of damage, and luckily I do outspeed, so it goes down in a single hit. Then out comes Kingdra. Swallow is faster than Dustox, and Psychic doesn't even deal half to it, so Venomoth is going to have to step in and take it down with another Psychic. And then he sends out his next Pokemon, which is a Heracross. And because it's part fighting, it's not actually all that dangerous, so I go ahead and have Dustox set up Light Screen, that way Kingdra isn't going to be hitting me with strong Hydro Pumps, and it should hopefully decide to swap over to Double Edge instead. Of course, Heracross goes down to a Psychic, and then he sends out his second Shadow Pokemon, a Shadow Electabuzz, which could actually be a threat, and is also partially why I set up the Light Screen, because if it goes for Shadow Storm, that could actually deal quite a bit of damage. So I go for Psychic to take Electabuzz down to very low health, and unfortunately I didn't account for the fact that Shadow Storm is up, so Moonlight wasn't healing nearly as much as I thought it would, and so Dustox gets taken down by Electabuzz with a crit Shadow Break. So I finish it off on the following turn, and then he sends out his final Pokemon, a Shadow Snorlax. Now, as long as I don't get hit by Shadow End, there is a pretty good chance I could win here. Though to raise my odds, I do want to put it to sleep, that way it won't be attacking every single turn. So luckily on the second attempt of Sleep Powder, it goes to sleep, and now I take down Kingdra because I really need the leftovers to actually start healing me, that way when a Snorlax eventually wakes up, it's not going to be able to one-shot me, hopefully. Go for Silver Wind, and that's doing much less damage than I expected. And it also has the leftovers item, which unfortunately means that while it could have been a 4-shot, it's unfortunately going to be a 5-shot. And Snorlax of course wakes up, hits a Shadow Wind, takes me down to 5 HP, but I'm able to hang on and finish it off with a Silver Wind. and a crit, definitely not necessary, but Venomoth is a thorough Pokemon. Then I go into the battle against Gorgon once again. He leads with Slowking and an Ursaring, and on the first turn I go for Silverwind, which unfortunately doesn't quite take down Slowking. It is very close though, it's probably just a range. Out comes Aggron, and I use Psychic into it from both of my bugs, which takes it down to a quarter. Dustox gets hit by a crit slash, taking it down pretty low, and Iron Tail finishes it off, so unfortunately Venomoth is going to have to do a lot of work now. Aggron goes down, and then he sends out Walrein, which I go for Psychic into, and unfortunately it's not even dealing half. It goes for Earthquake, also not doing much to me because it is neutral. Go for another Psychic, taking it down to low red, and Walrein's Ice Beam is doing quite a bit more damage to me, and Ursaring takes me down to about a quarter with Slash. And at this point, I think the only way I might have a chance at winning is going for Silverwind and hopefully getting an Omni Boost. Unfortunately, I don't get it on Walrein, and I think that was really my only chance. I go for Psychic into Poliwrath, and it actually survives on a little bit of HP, and the Fruity Pebbles start raining down. I go for another Psychic to finish it off, but it's already too late. He sends out his final Pokemon, a Shadow Mr. Mime, and Ursaring Slash finishes me off. So I go into the battle once again, and honestly, I do think that I just got a bad range on Silverwind, which I did. Slowking goes down in a single hit, and then out comes Aggron. I go into Silverwind into it as well, which was definitely just a bad call. I should have gone for Psychic either way. But anyway, it gets taken down to a quarter, just like before. Slash doesn't get a crit this time, and Aggron actually misses its Iron Tail, so it goes down with not too much issue, and then out comes Walrein. Now that the two of them are together, I know for a fact I can finish it in just a couple turns, though Dustox does hit a crit, taking it down to below half health, so there is a chance Venomoth could just finish it off with a Psychic. Unfortunately, it is very close, but it's not quite a one-shot. Walrein goes down, and then out comes Poliwrath once again, and now that both of my Pokemon are here, I can take it down in a single turn without having to worry about it setting up Shadow Sky, and then he sends out the Shadow Mr. Mime once again, which I should be able to take down with a couple Silverwinds, and Dustox goes down to a crit slash. That is a bit unfortunate. Mr. Mime does luckily go down to just a single Silverwind, and then all that's left is the Ursaring, which Psychic takes it down to half. Slash doesn't get any crits, and I finish it off with another Psychic. Definitely a closer fight than I expected, but Gorgon goes down, and we move on to Ardos, which I accidentally forgot to record the first attempt for, but basically I lost. Anyway, now moving on to the third attempt, and he leads with a Shadow Manectric and Ninjask. I can't take it down in a single Psychic with Venomoth, so unfortunately it does survive on low red health, though it decides to go for Shadow End on this attempt instead of setting up Shadow Sky, and I finish it off with a Silverwind, though I was really hoping for an Omni Boost. Then out comes Salamence, and I go for a double Psychic into it because I really just need to take it down as quick as possible, and luckily two Psychics do actually take it down below half, though I do think it's a range whether or not Venomoth can actually finish it off from this percent. Luckily it does, and then he sends out Flygon. I go for Psychic, which deals about a third of its health, and Psychic might be able to take it down, I'm not exactly sure. I go for it, and Psychic does. So he sends out his next Pokemon, a Shadow Marowak, and even though Dustox is getting very low, I absolutely need to get rid of Marowak as soon as possible. So despite having an opportunity to heal, I decide not to take it and finish off Marowak, and then he sends out his final Pokemon, a Shadow Lapras. Now unfortunately I don't really have anything amazing for it, so I go for Sleep Powder to put it to sleep. That way it's not going to set up Shadow Sky, and Dustox can get the most out of its Moonlight, which luckily Ninjask decided not to attack it. Go for Psychic, dealing about a quarter, and another Psychic taking it down to half. Unfortunately it wakes up fairly quickly, and Shadow Sky is now active. But I do know I can finish it off on the following turn, and it's also slower than both of my Pokemon, so it goes down, and then all that's left is the Ninjask, which is going to protect this turn, and because of that, I'm actually going to use Moonlight at this point. That way, if Venomoth does end up going down, Dustox actually has a chance of taking it down, though the Shadow Sky does make it less effective. But anyway, Ninjask now attacks, and it goes for Aerial Ace into Dustox, taking it down, and Psychic takes down Ninjask. So with that, we beat Eldis, and now we move on to the big box legendary, Shadowlugia, and I'm going to try to put it to sleep, which luckily I do, and that's because I really don't have anything great for it. I go for Silver Wind, which really isn't doing that much, but it's definitely better than what Psychic would be doing. Venomoth gets a lucky Omni Boost, which should definitely help speed this up. However, there is definitely one big downside to this, and that's that Lugia has the pressure ability, which doubles the PP usage. So Dustox actually runs out of PP, and Venomoth only has one left. So I go into the battle against Greevil now. He leads with a Shadow Rhydon and Moltres, and I go for Psychic into the Rhydon right away to see how much damage I do to it, and unfortunately it's not a one-shot. I set up Light Screen to lessen the amount of damage I take from the Moltres. Rhydon hits the Shadow End, I go for another Psychic to finish off the Rhydon, and then I go for another Psychic to deal a little bit of damage to Moltres. Now, Executor is a one-shot from either of these Pokemon with Silver Wind, or at least I would presume it to be because it is 4 times effective. So I'm not going to worry about it too much and instead focus on Moltres, which unfortunately, even with another turn of Psychics, isn't enough to take it down. Though it finishes off Venomoth, I finally take it down with one last Psychic, and then out comes Tauros. And because this is the first attempt, I just want to see how much damage I'm dealing, so I go for Psychic into Tauros, but unfortunately it does outspeed Dustox, which is really good to know. I go back into the battle for a second attempt, I go for Psychic into Rhydon, once again, not a one-shot, I set up Light Screen right away once again as well. And one thing I learned is that if these two actually hit both of their attacks into Dustox, it goes down in a single hit, which is definitely not a great position to be in. So I take down the Rhydon, out comes Executor. And Venomoth is actually taking the hits fairly well because of the Light Screen being up. Executor goes down to a single Silver Wind, then out comes Tauros, and now I can really get an idea of how much Psychic's going to be doing to it. And Psychic is dealing over half. Okay, so maybe if Dustox were still around, I could take it down in a single turn. And unfortunately, Tauros is able to set up Shadow Sky, so even though I am able to take it down, his legendary birds are going to be dealing more damage. Moltres does give me one last turn to check another damage number. I go for Psychic into Articuno, and it is doing pitiful amounts of damage, so Articuno is going to be a huge threat. So now on the final attempt number 4, surprisingly. And the reason it's surprising is because nothing's changed. I'm still the same level, and I haven't even used my rare candies yet, because all this was extra training to get to the next level. That way my rare candies would be more effective. But anyway, of course, I still can't take down Rhydon in a single hit, and Moltres is still doing quite a bit of damage with Shadow Fire, even with the Light Screen up. However, on this attempt, I was toying with the idea of using Sleep Powder against all the bigger threats in this fight, such as Moltres, because it does deal quite a bit of damage in the first few rounds of the fight, and it does take a few turns to actually take down. I know I outspeed Tauros, so I can put it to sleep before it sets up Shadow Sky. However, the sleep effect does have 2 big issues. The first is Sleep Powder isn't very accurate, and the amount of turns you sleep is random. So Moltres actually woke up after just a couple turns of being asleep, so while the strategy is certainly fine, it unfortunately does require a little bit of luck to even get off the ground. But anyway, Tauros gets taken down to a sliver of health, which is very unfortunate because I thought Venomoth would just finish it off. So I go for Silver Wind, and unfortunately no Omni Boost, but Tauros does go down, and then out comes Articuno. And Articuno is definitely the biggest threat on his team, so I go for Psychic, get a lucky special defense drop, which is going to be very helpful to take it down a little quicker. Go for Psychic, taking it down to below half, and a critical hit Psychic finishes it off. Definitely quite lucky, but I'll take that. Then out comes the final Pokemon, a Shadow Zapdos, and I go for Psychic into it, taking it down to nearly half. Go for Moonlight with Dustox to take it up nearly to full health. Venomoth gets hit by both moves from the legendary birds, though luckily Light Screen is still active. I go for Psychic, taking it down to low yellow, and Psychic from Dustox finishes it off, and then all that's left is Moltres. So as long as I don't get terrible luck, I should be able to take it down. I go for Psychic and Light Screen just to guarantee that as long as it doesn't get a crit, I can win. And a couple of Psychics later, finish it off. And so with that, we defeat Greevil, and now to see just how well these two did. They beat the game at a time of 10 hours, 18 minutes, and 38 seconds, with Venomoth being at level 64 and Dustox being at level 57. And they fainted 15 times throughout the game, 10 of those to bosses and 5 of those to random trainers. So these two bugs together actually do quite well throughout the game, with no real issues against most of the bosses, and not too much issue against most trainers. So I think that they definitely have a lot going for them. Especially Venomoth starting with Silver Wind, it's just a very solid move, especially in the early game, that's even good later in the game. Now the other thing I want to mention is the Shield Dust ability preventing all the added effects from moves. So That really helps because Body Slam doesn't paralyze and Mud Shot doesn't lower speed. There's just a lot of instances where moves have those secondary effects that can really slow down Pokemon and make battles nearly impossible, so it's really nice that these two don't have to worry about that at all. And of course, with Dustox being more of a defensive Pokemon, it definitely synergizes with Venomoth being more offensive, though that does kind of contribute to the downfall of these two being together, and that's the fact that if Venomoth goes down, oftentimes Dustox goes down with not too much fight left in it, simply because it doesn't really have the attack power to take most things down. Though despite this shortcoming, they actually find themselves in the A tier, placing pretty well. And if we compare that to Dustox and Beautifly, we can see that Dustox is actually a fairly good partner if paired with the right Pokemon. But anyway, if you did enjoy this video, consider liking and subscribing. If you have any Pokemon suggestions, please put them down below. Thank you so much for watching, and bye!